I usually get the headache about half hour later, so it should hit me
Right.
in a little while.
Okay.
Right, sometimes I was feeling like my hands get numb.
Right, you get your fingers numb, you can get this
Your
sort of
tongue is numb,
dissociated,
yeah.
right? You know, or you get those vision.
Yeah, those wiggly ones.
Right. Yeah.
We're good.
All right.
Yep.
Please rise and join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I guess we're going to start with a non-agenda item, which is just kind of discussing, I guess, the general discussion on dissemination of updated, and then really additional, updated and current information on the firehouse municipal building project.
Yep. So, well, the main thing at this point, obviously, you've seen the mailer that's gone out to all the households in Irvington. I was going to say there's a pen there. And, you know, that there was an indication in there of some upcoming public meetings. We do have two, what we're calling open house style public meetings. One is scheduled for this Saturday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So they're scheduled from 1 to 2:30, just to give people a window of time. You know, they don't have to be there the whole time, of course, but, and we're holding that up in the lobby of Village Hall. So not in this room. We thought this room was maybe even a little small, depending on how people, you know, mingle, and, you know, we have boards set up for people to look at. So we thought the lobby was a little bit more open for that. And, so that's this Saturday. The second of the meetings is next Wednesday, so a week from tonight, October 18th, and that's 7 to 8:30. We're also planning on, to the extent that anyone's interested, probably, you know, towards the end of that window, we'll probably take a little field trip across the street to the firehouse for anyone that's interested. You know, it's,
I think the photos on the mailer don't necessarily do justice to the level of crampedness.
yeah. So on that topic, there's going to be a video put together that I had the pleasure of narrating in a tour, basically a tour through the firehouse, a tour through the theater and the Justice Court and the, you know, lobby and Village Hall, and, you know, just to show what the facilities look like. And the I don't know if it's going to come out on the video, but the firehouse walk was pretty alarming, actually. I mean, the amount of clearance between the trucks is ridiculous. If I had turnout gear, I'm not even sure I could open the door wide enough because it was so close to the wall. It was literally less than 3 foot clearance. I mean, the door opens halfway, how do you get in? Like, it's just, anyway, I think all that comes out in some of the video. But certainly we're going to invite people over to take a look and understand that.
If they see the decontamination area, that there isn't one. If
Yeah,
they see
the little
sink,
the little laundry machine in the corner, yeah, that thing.
and then also the changing being right by the exhaust pipes. Like, that's the thing. Could you imagine? I don't like to stand behind a car when it's running, let alone behind a large truck while I'm putting on my uniform.
Yep. Yeah. No, I mean, look, they do have exhaust capture systems, but they're not in place when the trucks are moving. Obviously, they need to get in, and then, you know, they get installed. So if the trucks are idling for a short time, they can be captured, but the transition in and out there obviously can't be on. So it's an eye opener for sure.
Are we going to send a village email blast about the meetings?
Yes, it was just sent out at 5:30 today.
I got it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, no, this is 5:30.
I plan on doing from the mayor's desk about it as well.
Great.
So.
Yeah, and then the plan is to also do a reminder that day, or each of those days. And then obviously if Brian's going to back it up with something additional, that's great. So that's the next order of business. You know, since the original mailer went out, we also posted pretty comprehensive information about, to give people a full picture of what the project is, what the benefits are, what's actually happening, you know, describing which offices are going to be moved and which ones remain, and some of the renovations that'll take place in their place. So we tried to describe that, which obviously that can't be done on the mailer. That would have made the mailer 8 pages long, you know. So that information is posted. We have pretty comprehensive financial information posted, as I know you know, and we're going to make sure that the public is aware of it as well. We do have new calculations in terms of interest rates on the bond. But I think again, and that's all in full disclosure, but of course, we can't see what's into the future as to where those long-term rates are going. So I think it's helpful for the public even to see a range of, what the possibilities are, you know what I mean? We can't pinpoint the exact rate, of course, but it gives them an idea. And we're also going to put together a little explanation about, the possible options for reducing the size of the borrowing, whether it's using existing fund balances, which I know you've talked about publicly. And then, the obvious thing of searching for outside funding in the form of grants. We think that there are numerous opportunities there, but obviously none of them are guaranteed. So we're not trying to say that, and we'll explain that. So, but we'll at least show what the impact might be if some grants were to be obtained. So, so all that information is posted. I think there's another thing we're going through is trying to put together a frequently asked questions. I know there's been some questions that we've all been presented with, and I mean, I've answered a few questions relating to the police shooting range, for example. So we'll put together some information that so people don't have to hunt around for it. So that's pretty much it. I mean, there's I know the press has been contacted. There'll be some op-eds written and placed in the various publications, but to be honest with you, it's really only the local weekly or monthly in some cases, River Journal and Hudson Independent, and of course the Enterprise. The Journal News is kind of non-existent when it comes to local coverage. So.
And the Times isn't interested.
I haven't reached out to them, so.
Well, I'm planning to be at the Saturday meeting, but I'm not going to be able to make the weekday.
Yeah, and it's not, I certainly not all of you, need to attend all the meetings, but yeah, to be there is great. Yeah, and we'll have our architects, of course, will be there. Our public relations firm will be there. Village staff, myself, Ed Marin, members of the fire department will be there. And again, not in any show of force way where they're coming out, but just people there to answer questions. Maybe some theater folks will be there, intermixed as well.
I think Greg is planning on being there.
Yeah.
Or actually, Kim, I believe, is going to be there.
Yeah, so
I can definitely go to Wednesday once I'm covered.
Yeah, I'll be there Saturday in the first half hour Wednesday, but then I have to leave.
Yeah, I can go early Saturday. I have to leave.
So we have good matches. That's good.
Perfect.
Yeah.
You can probably go Wednesday. I can't go Saturday.
It sounds like a good balance because it sounds like half of us will be there Wednesday and Saturday.
yeah, we tried to. I mean, obviously we picked not just the evening, but we picked the weekend in case that works for people. It's not going to work for everyone. We even picked the afternoon, so we might avoid some morning sports.
Right.
Who knows?
And I was thinking too for Monday's meeting, we can even for the next couple meetings we can put on. I think is this the last meeting before there might be one more before the vote.
So the 16th, the upcoming October meeting is the second to last because there's one on November 6th, which is.
I just figured we could put on like an agenda item,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
Answer questions related to the project or something like that.
Sure.
Just so that people know that they like almost make it like a public comment section on that particular issue.
Okay.
That's good, yeah.
I don't see any downside to it. So.
Yep. Okay. And look, if there's anything that that you think needs to be addressed, whether it's answering a frequently asked question, like I said, we're still, that's not quite complete in terms of posting, but we're getting there. But if you think there are specific questions that you're hearing, or even questions you might have, we can answer them. Just let me know.
I guess they're going to be a trustees lounge.
Yeah. Well, I can answer that question. No.
Former mayor's lounge.
Oh, a former mayor's lounge. Yeah, that would...
You have to be out of office for a month.
So that's that.
Okay.
So far, I mean, honestly, it's hard to characterize, obviously. Some of the feedback that I've gotten has been positive. I've had questions, and the questions often begin with, I support the project, but I have a question about this. And I answer the question and they say, oh, that makes sense. And we move on. So that's reasonable.
People should reach out with questions.
Yeah,
Just,
and-
there's reasonable answers to anything they ask.
Yeah.
I mean, we've thought about a lot of stuff.
You may not like the answer, but that's
Right. Oh,
the
yeah,
answer's
yeah, yeah.
there, It's not that it hasn't been
It's a
thought
value
out.
proposition. I haven't had anyone say, other than like, I can't believe there's going to be a gym. But to me, it's not like
Right.
we're having, like an indoor lap pool or something. It's a fairly basic gym, but I don't think it's like, some kind of over-the-top gilded project. And then it's just really, hey, this is what we're accomplishing, but it's going to cost this much for me. Does that make sense? And that's the value proposition that everyone has to make on their own. I think we just give as much information as possible.
And then encouraging people to vote, because it's a low turnout election to begin with. So just getting people to vote.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, look, I some of the conversations I've had are, I mean, I'm pretty frank about the whole thing. It's not a small dollar amount. This is the biggest project we've ever undertaken in the village in its history. So I'm not, sugarcoating that. But, you have two other choices besides this, two reasonable choices. One is do nothing, which I'm not sure that's reasonable. And the other is to address the fire department issues. And that's $13 or $13.5 million. So, the extra distance that you're going here unlocks a whole realm of things that you're addressing. I mean, I think that's pretty well thought out, and it's pretty good value. And it's hard to use the word value with an $18 million project. I realize that, but if you look at the bigger picture, it's pretty compelling. Anyway, all right. So, Brian, you want to jump into the first item here?
Yeah, sure.
We started with the firehouse.
We added a bonus one to
Yeah.
time until you got here.
Vamping.
Yeah, so
I'm very fast.
discussion of upcoming gas-powered leaf blower ban, which is a topic that we always seem to love to talk about.
Do we?
It never goes away. But
So where, just to tee it up for you, where we are here is you obviously passed this ban 3 years ago. It's ready to be in effect as of the end of the year, December 16th. You could have said nothing and it would have happened. But I think the idea back 3 years ago was to really, circle back and at least reconsider the ban and understand what the lay of the land is in terms of electric equipment and whether that's, can do the job for most people, whether you think that people have had enough time to transition away from the gas powered into the electric. And so that's really, where you are. You're at, and you asked for feedback. So, now's the time. Not that you're making a final decision here at the table, but if you're going to change what's on the books, we need some lead time to change it. So, you need to figure it out at some point. So, anyway, that's why this is on the agenda.
I guess, go ahead.
Nope.
Okay. I guess I would sort of like to know where people stand around this table, because I personally am in favor of letting it go forward. I know we keep hearing it I think we're going to keep hearing from both sides, understand the limitations with the equipment. I think there are some changes in practice that can happen. I think it's very difficult to change what you've always been doing until you have to change it. So I personally do not see a need to change it. It means changing behavior, and it's always, changing behavior is always difficult, right? So, and I think, with any issue in front of the village, when I've been on this side and the other side, like, we can just keep hearing people. I was one of those people who I wrote the same letter like 100 times. So I feel like we've heard what we were going to hear, and we're just going to hear the same, more and more of the same. So I think, I think we need to know where we stand on it.
Larry, can you remind me, are there any exceptions to the present? Not in the present law,
In going
As of
forward.
December, yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, I can pull it up right now just to be sure. Yeah, I don't remember. Because I think the law starts
We should
out.
know that.
Yeah.
We should know what.
Yeah.
What it is we're talking about, right?
I
Well,
don't think that we're
We did have some
I thought there was
always
exceptions
people,
before,
yes, we
yeah,
did. We had exceptions in the
Mhm.
existing.
for the big buildings and for the
So
country.
now the
club.
question
I mean,
is,
I think only technically, we don't have to follow it, and obviously the school district doesn't have to follow it, but that's about it.
Yeah, no,
But that's not a law exception, that's just a New York State law.
all right, so the way the law leads in is effective December 16th, 2023, using or operating or permitting to be used or operated any gas-powered leaf blower or sprayer at any time. That's what's prohibited.
And it doesn't say later on any exceptions, right?
Then it says, all the other exceptions after that are under the heading of until December 16, 2023. The following can be used and when.
That'd be helpful to
But
go
let me-
through those exceptions.
Okay, I'll tell you what, let me put this up on the screen. I'm sorry it's to your back. I wasn't anticipating using the screen, but we can run. I mean, you can move if you want. I apologize.
Larry's a young man, he can.
You're in your position.
Gonna call your wife? No, I'm just kidding.
Very good.
All right, so. Okay, so again, the A is what I just read. And then until is starting in B. So, I mean, obviously it was allowing people to use it during the following situations, but it also included the exception for golf and tennis clubs, municipal employees. Right here, right?
And then it was emergencies and snow.
Right. So that presumably the way that logic works, those exceptions that are listed there go away, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And I guess if you're not gonna have, if gas powered or banned, then it doesn't make sense to say they could be used responding to an emergency when you have a gas run. I think those exceptions were there because of the time limits.
Right.
And those time limits didn't apply when responding to an emergency or when removing snow.
Right.
Right, but that doesn't mean we can't still have an exception for an emergency.
Yeah, except it's a
The
practical
understanding is that we
matter.
don't want there to be any.
Yeah, you've got your electric blower in the garage for waiting for emergency, I mean, either you have an,
Right, no, I hear
I
you.
mean, the
Yeah,
gas
that's
one,
fine.
you just get,
I don't know what the emergency would be, that you would need a gas power blower.
yeah.
Well, my feeling is that I would like the law to be changed to,
To sunset,
how are we wording this, okay?
the law would continue the way it is,
No,
meaning.
no, I would want it to sunset
Yeah.
to banning.
To the ban to go into
gas
effect.
vehicles, and I
Yeah,
would
which
want
is how
no
the law
exceptions.
is now.
Yes,
Right, and I would want it to have no exceptions.
Same, yeah, I'm on the same page there.
I mean, to me, I've been listening. I really have been. I read the letters. I listened to people coming in, and I don't know if it's a lawyer in me, but I started like balancing the two sides. So, because I don't think anyone was necessarily, almost anyone was really in bad faith. So, the people who support the leaf blowers being not usable, I guess, the argument is that they're a nuisance to people, they're environmentally damaging, and they're unnecessary. I'm like, okay. The argument on the other side is that these terrible things will happen if you don't do it. And if it's cosmetic, I'm not moved by that, because I don't think that global climate change is such a huge thing that I don't really, trying to make cosmetic arguments to me is not gonna work. So the question is, the horrible things that they say are gonna happen, ticks and fires and falls and all these horrible things. Obviously, nobody wants any of those things to happen. I'm not making light of it. But what I ask myself is, Brian, you made the point last time, how was this dealt with 30 years ago when there were no leaf blowers? And I extend that to say, last time I checked, the city of Larchmont was still standing. It hadn't burnt down. It hadn't been infested with ticks, and everyone is now under Lyme disease.
Lanternflies.
Lanternflies, right?
That we can't do anything about.
And so what it seems to me is that this is actually like an empirical question, right? It's like either it does these things or it doesn't, right? And we know of other places that have done this. We had a landscaper in Connecticut, come on and say, I do all my jobs with electric, right? We have other municipalities that have done it and they're still standing. So my take on it is the law is supposed to sunset. There's nothing right now that's saying that anything bad will happen if it sunsets, other than some people saying that these terrible things are going to happen. So let's let the law sunset and let's wait and see what happens. If people can't find landscapers, or if there's this uptick in fires and the fire department is saying, guys, you got to do something, we're getting double the amount of alarms that we ever got before. And if the local hospitals are reporting, huge upticks in Lyme disease or whatever, well, we have to listen. We have to say, you know what, maybe there was some value to this, and we can go back. This is not a forever decision. But right now, it seems to me that it's a little bit of fear. Right? I'm not saying fear mongering, I'm saying people are afraid, right? And I think we have to sometimes be brave enough to say, it doesn't seem based on the evidence that this is going to be a major problem. Right? So if that's the case, I think we let it sunset, but we still listen, right? And if we start hearing that there are problems, we will listen. But as of right now, I just don't see any compelling reason not to let the law sunset, because it's all conjecture. That's my feeling on it.
I guess I'm the only one in the other column. I kind of have a middle ground where I still don't believe, and I would actually love to invite the guy from Connecticut to come down here at the end of October, early November, after a rain, and show me that he can do an acre with a couple electric powered leaf blowers. Because I spoke to the rec department, I've spoken to DPW, I've spoken to a bunch of landscapers, and they just don't believe it works. I would love to see that it works. What I would actually like to do is eliminate the spring cleanup. Keep the fall one more year, kind of the same thing. It would sunset next year if we don't act again, but get rid of that, the March through May cleanup, which would, again, eliminate it for more time. And then maybe even move the other one October 15th to December 15th. So you're kind of shrinking it until it goes away. But, if I'm the only one, then it's not going to really matter. So I just don't believe that. I do believe that if you are a large property owner, I do believe people can rake. I just think that you're going to need to have 5 landscapers there for 2 hours rather than 3 for 40 minutes or whatever it is. So it's just going to cost more. And until the technology gets there, I'm willing to give a little. I actually hate gas-powered leaf blowers, and I think they're so overused that it's ridiculous, which is why I'm kind of less sympathetic to that side of it. But I still feel that there is, no matter how much they overuse it to chase 3 leaves down a driveway, there is still a use case for it for one time a year when it's the heaviest leaf season. But
For all properties, or just large properties?
for me, kind of for all properties, because to me it's too hard. I mean, to me, the nice thing about an absolute ban is you see a gas-powered leaf blower, you can't use it. Versus, I never would want the police department to be out there with a map going, you're actually 0.44 acres, not a half acre, so you can't. To me, it gets too complicated. I think it either has to be on or off.
That was one of the problems that we suggested from a staff level, that exception or that provision be eliminated from the last iteration of this law.
Yeah, because I think
not practically
without enforcement, laws don't mean anything. Right. So why have it if you can't enforce it? Which I think
that's a great explanation.
The beauty to me of a complete ban is you see one, you can't use it. Versus what day of the week, what time, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I do think if it's certain dates, it's pretty easy too. It's just yes or no. Versus our first law, that was so hard. We had to.
That was tough.
It was like the diagram you had to follow. But I just don't personally believe that the battery powered are there yet, and I do think they've gotten better. I think they're close. I don't know if it's one more year though. That's the thing. It's like it could be forever before they're really.
Right. I mean, I would agree with you that the one instance of wet leaves is a difficult one to overcome.
You can rake them,
but but there's been a 3-year run-up where I have not seen or heard anybody adjust behavior or plans for it. We're hearing the same complaints now that we heard 3 years ago. If we extended this until the next leaf system, nothing's going to change, and no one's going to change behavior, and we're going to hear the same complaints again. And I think for the handful of situations of wet leaves where it becomes difficult, that's what's an extra time is going to have to come into effect. And I just think that's the price that we all have to pay. And I have a lawn service also, small property, but a lawn service as well. And my lawn guy hasn't been threatening to leave, but we'll see what happens when this goes into effect.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, a few times a year, maybe it takes longer or more people, or maybe you do it
you know, every week and a half instead of every
Well,
week
you mulch,
or every 2
you
weeks.
mulch
Yeah, we
leaves,
mulch
or
the
you leave
leaves.
some of the leaves under the trees
Yeah.
that you might have gone for.
I think there's a lot of things where,
There's a
like,
lot
you know,
of-
recycling is more of a pain, and separating your stuff is more of a pain. Compost is more of a pain, but there's a benefit that, you know, for the times when it, you know, you have to sort of pay that price. So I think it doesn't seem that burdensome.
I don't also kind of, when you said, it's like I don't believe people are gonna die from this decision. So, but we make the wrong decision
Yeah.
here, and, yes, it might be more expensive for landscapers, $75,000 more to do, a field point to me seems absurd. Like, that's when capitalism comes in and someone else comes in and undercuts that guy.
Right.
Like, to me, some of it is hyperbole, and, maybe the proof's in the pudding, and maybe there really are no landscapers will ever work in Irvington again, and then we have to figure it out. But I'm hopeful that maybe the guy from Connecticut will come down and, fill that void, and he'd tell 2 of his friends or whatever. Like, I think in a year from now, it could be fine and no one would even realize.
There's more than just the guy from Connecticut, right? Like on our street, there's actually like a woman-owned company that does a few of the properties, and they do all sort of like organic landscaping. They don't overly like load leaves. I just think people are used to this aesthetic. People are used to doing what they do, and like I don't think another year, another 2 years, like if the equipment's never going to be the same, because it's never going to be like the same thing that they're used to doing, right? Like, and maybe like the gas blowers get even better and more powerful during that time, So I think we'll probably be in kind of the same predicament. But, I just always think about my own property. Like, I remember when I first moved here, and they would come to blow the leaves, and I would be like, who am I paying to blow the leaves? Like, it's like they would come and blow the leaves, and then there'd be more leaves, like, like there were always leaves during that time period. And then it just never made sense to me. Like, I was like, can't we just like leave them and wait and then move them when most of them were down? So I just think this is really about changing behavior. That's what I think it is. And I think just to remind us that we did get letters from people that live in Field Point and other big sort of properties who are on the other side, right? Who do not want the gas leak blowers to continue. So, I think we just have to kind of like make a decision and roll forward. And if we're wrong and the ticks come and get us before the lantern flies, well then, we can always change the rules. But I'm definitely not in favor of changing it.
So there's nothing to do. So easy.
If that's a decision, then there's nothing to do, correct?
But I would push back a little on nothing to do, because I think part of our responsibility is that if we do allow this law to sunset, we have a responsibility to be monitoring the result of that decision. Because I don't think anyone wants to say we're walking away like, we solved it, let's have a party. It's more like, this is the next step, so let's see how that goes.
But
And
part of
certainly,
it, yeah.
in the beginning of the spring to send out reminders.
Yeah. And I think we talked about this too, right? Like enforcement, it should be education first, right? Before we go like full enforcement crazy, I think education. And I think this too is where having a sustainability coordinator is a good thing, because she can do that ongoing education piece.
Well, and she worked, I think we heard from the police chief, she worked directly with the chief to have a warning card, something that the police could use to hand out.
And she was gonna do some demonstration, which hasn't happened, which didn't.
Yeah.
But I think she's planning that.
That would make sense in the spring or before the spring, leading into the spring, so people have options and.
Maybe we're gonna do something in the fall, right before it's like the acquisition, so people know what to do.
Oh, okay.
And they can't use them.
But they can in the fall, that's the thing, so they can.
No, meaning after, like for December, starting after December.
Yes, that's what I was saying, so they're ready for the first season, which is the spring.
Yeah, the first time they'd really be able to use it, that you're now banning is March, or
Right,
whatever the
right,
spring
because they wouldn't be
season
able
is.
to use it after December anyway, until
Yeah.
March, even if we kept this law going for another year or two.
But demonstrations when there's a lot of leaves around is much more effective.
Right.
That's true too,
The
yeah.
fall would be
yeah.
helpful.
So yeah, so
And
maybe
to
not.
give people time, that's what she said, to give people time to kind of like educate themselves on what we're gonna do.
All right, so we move on to the review of changes to the architecture review board law.
Yeah, well, there's actually three sets of changes here. There'll be a lot more changes, but once you agree on the substance, those are just things that I'll make. I'll have to put into the different local laws, but these would be the substantive changes. The first is the one that says amending the village code to create an architectural advisory committee. That's pretty much the one we went through last time. I had a lot of open questions. The only change in this was changing on the third page, changing the time that the AAC has to decide on things, on references from the building department to 30 days. I have 14 changes. So that's all that's.
And that was responding to Rick's comment that they're volunteers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that made sense.
Okay, then, all right, then the next one is the one, this is gonna take somewhat more time. Amending the zoning code with respect to the historic overlay district.
Sorry, I had them in a different order on the agenda, but it's, no,
Okay,
it's fine, no, go ahead.
okay, amending the one, the historic overlay district one.
I'm almost there. I'm there.
Okay, the overlay district regulations are in the zoning code, they're not in the architectural review section, they're in the zoning code. And so this is what this is from, and I'll just go through it. This is pretty much the article as it reads. The changes I have are in italics. The change on the first page is nothing, just demolition, because that term is used besides demolish, you know, the act of it's the same as demolish, so that's not a substantive change at all. Then the main changes in 224-199, before, the way it worked before, any demolition of a contributing building in the historic district had to get reviewed by the architectural review board before the planning board even looked at it. And just so you understand, the term demolition doesn't actually mean demolishing the building. Demolish, the term demolish is on the first page. It's to pull down, raise, destroy, remove, or relocate all or a substantial portion of a building. Now, a substantial portion is any portion of an exterior wall or porch facing a public way, or 50% more of the footprint of the building or other things, so that you couldn't make any change really to the front of the house if it's facing the street. That would be considered a demolition. It had to be reviewed by the ARB before it went to the planning board. So now, so now it's going to be a planning board decision, and so instead of, it'll read, it can't be demolished without the approval of the planning board upon the recommendation of the architectural advisory committee. Then I added this section, as you requested, if the planning board determines not to follow the recommendation of the AAC, the proposed demolition shall be referred to the board of trustees, which will make the decision whether to permit the demolition.
So I think that gives a level of protection that I know the Historical Society is looking for. It still gives the AAC a level of
Input.
authority.
Yeah,
is the
okay.
word. So I think that's good.
Just because we've had all those discussions like before when we were talking about this. I mean, I think the idea is that the planning board has a certain role, right? And that role is not necessarily changing, right? What they're in charge of like reviewing, so that if the expertise is in the AAC, that expertise is still there, right? So that their recommendation should be followed. Unless there's, conflicting expertise, but I mean, my assumption was that the planning board is looking at a certain set of rules and what they're sort of focused on, and then the idea is that you have expertise in the AAC, and then it's just that it would come earlier instead of these two sort of processes.
It's not exactly true, Arlene, because right now, the planning board doesn't look at architectural stuff, They may, but mostly they don't. They leave that to the ARB. It's not going to be their responsibility.
So I guess I'm agreeing with you that they don't do that. And I thought the idea, at least when we were talking in the committee, was it's not that that's changing. They're not all of a sudden going to be opining on the architectural elements. That's still what that committee is for. That was my understanding of it, right? That's right, yeah.
Well, yeah, except that the committee's just making recommendations, and it's the
Right.
planning board that's gonna be making the decisions. This provision about if the planning board doesn't agree with the AAC only applies in the historic district. So that if you come in for something, and the AAC says, yeah, we like their new door, and the planning board doesn't, and they don't accept the AAC's decision.
But I think
That's
Arlene's point the
Yeah.
last time was, but if that happens 5 times in a row, then we have a problem.
Yeah, we're gonna have a
Yeah.
problem,
If we have a
and that should
problem,
not
we need to
happen,
review.
Agreed.
that should not happen.
But I think it's tricky to somehow put it in the code that the planning board must follow the AAC, because that's setting us up for situations like we have had in the past where, ARB was making decisions based upon items that might have been planning items, and, there was kind of this intermixing of roles and unclear. So we want the planning board to be the gatekeeper, and we expect the planning board to follow the recommendations of the AAC, provided that they're legitimate and reasonable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If they're,
I
if
agree with
if
that.
something's unreasonable coming out of the AAC, you want have the planning board have the flexibility to not follow it.
Yeah,
If they
we
agree, then
spec-
we're good. It's
Right.
only if they don't agree, then we have to go to the next step, right?
Yeah, because we do specifically say the architectural advisory committee shall serve, not in this law, in the other one, in an advisory manner to the planning board and the building department. The planning board and the building inspector shall not be bound by and may act contrary to the recommendation of the AAC. That's inherent in this. Hopefully that won't happen.
Right.
But,
Practically speaking, we have to monitor it for sure.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Except with respect to the historic district, which has a special,
Which is where I think it's appropriate.
right,
If it goes back to Arlene's door, it's not as important as it is for demolishing something.
Right,
Historic
right.
district, I think. So I think it's set up well.
okay. So then, okay, the change in 224 to 100. Okay, that's just to change ARB to planning board and AAC for its recommendation. And that's all the. Now, there's a public hearing required on demolitions. I changed it to the planning board holding the public hearing, because I don't think the AAC can really hold, since it's an advisory board, it shouldn't really be holding public hearings, so.
Right.
Okay, so then the rest of the changes on page 4 are just substituting the planning board for the ARB. I think that's, okay. Then when you get to page 6, there was a provision for appeals that any person aggrieved by the ARB's disapproval, could appeal the decision to the Board of Trustees. That's actually a fairly new provision that we added a few years ago, because I'm a little unclear what you did if you didn't like an ARB decision. But that's just out altogether, because they're not making the decisions. It'll be the planning board making the decision, and if the applicant doesn't like the planning board's decision, they bring an Article 78 proceeding. There's no appeal from the planning board to either the ZBA or this board. You couldn't do it under state law anyway. So I don't think there's any open questions there. I think that pretty much reflects what we were doing last time. Okay. And then the last one is amending the zoning code with respect to the site development plan standard. Because remember, the planning board's gonna have a new role here. And we looked a little bit at the language from Briarcliff for its architectural standards. I think generally you did like them. But when I read the standards that are in the code now, they actually, I think, cover pretty well what they should be looking at. So that if you look at on the first page, C1. The planning board shall review the proposed location of main and accessory buildings on the site and their architectural relationships to one another. Okay, we've got some jurisdiction there. Then a little bit further on, and let me back up a little bit. In paragraph D, you see what I have eliminated there? It shall submit the application to the Environmental Conservation Board and the ARB. Okay, we'll go back to the Environmental Conservation Board, because I think that's something else we have to discuss.
Doesn't
We
exist.
should probably get rid of it altogether, since nobody's on it. And I don't think, however long I've been village
It's gotta be
attorney, I
at
think
least
it
10
was
years,
two,
hasn't it?
yeah, it was a couple years that Tom Jackson was doing it, and then not after that, nobody's been doing it.
And that was also kind of historical when we didn't have a good engineer, I think.
And
too.
it's really served no purpose. So, okay, we'll get back to that, okay. But, about submitting the application to the ARB, well, that's already in the other procedure that when the things come in, the building department is gonna turn it over. And in the case of proposed developments of 5 or more dwelling units, or floor area of 15,000 or more square feet, to the heads of each village department. I just don't think any of that stuff is done. And it doesn't make any sense to be there.
Have you seen it, Larry?
No.
It seems odd, like, sending it to Joe Archino and like,
You know,
head of the library.
a lot of this stuff,
We need more books.
This
a
is
lot
just
of
from the
this
'70s.
stuff was written in at the time of Legend Hollow.
Yes,
when
this is-
Legend Hollow was getting developed.
And maybe even before that, but yeah, in the heyday of development around here, when things were exploding and we were concerned about the impacts on the various aspects of village government.
But
I mean,
the
that was
thing
really
is,
the-
right
You
now,
want everyone to have an input as to what effect
well,
the
they
development might have.
They
Yeah.
do now, they would through secret,
Yeah.
because, if there's any development, it's gonna be subject to the State Environmental Quality Review Act. And one of the things they look at, what are the impacts on parks and recreation? What are the impacts on sewers? What are the impacts on, water? So it's all looked
So
at,
it's
it
covered.
just,
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's covered, I don't think it makes any sense for it to be there, so that's why that's out. But don't forget about the ECB, we'll come back to that, okay. Then, in C1, the way, there's some little changes there that I put in just because I'll read that sentence over and over and over, and it doesn't make any sense to me, the beginning of it. So, I think it makes a little more sense now. The planning board shall review the proposed location of main and accessory buildings on the site and their architectural relationships to one another, traffic circulation within the site, height and bulk of buildings. That's also relevant to the architectural review. Provision of utilities, disposition or disposal of solid and fluid waste, provision of off-street parking space, provision of buffer areas, and other open spaces on the site, planting and landscaping and display of signs and external lighting. Any development shall adequately handle pedestrian and vehicular traffic within the site in relation to the street system adjoining, and shall harmoniously and satisfactorily fit in with contiguous land and buildings in adjacent neighborhoods. I think that also gives them some jurisdiction architecturally. You want to make sure it fits in with the, with the other houses it's near. And then 3, I think, does the same thing. Buildings and structures and roads should be designed to relate harmoniously to surrounding buildings in the natural environment. Where appropriate, the planning board shall require that the residence be located at different elevations. I think there's probably enough there in the standards that exist, which I tried not to change very much, other than to be able to review what you would want them reviewing. It's not like you want them to say, whether it's architecturally pleasing to you or to the board, does it fit in with the other neighbors? Does it relate harmoniously to the rest of the neighborhood? And I think that probably, as I looked at the language more closely, it's not bad.
Was there anything that's not in there that was in some of the other
Well,
models that
okay.
you were looking at?
Not so much
did you
the
teed
the
me up?
model.
There you go. Funny you ask.
I said you teed me up for that.
Is this
Right,
number, is this
right,
item
right.
4 you're about to talk about?
Yeah,
Because I'm reading that and I cannot believe this would be in a law.
that's right, that's taken right now from the ARB law. That's in the ARB law now. And I put it there, not because I think it's so great, but for purposes of discussion. Right now, that's in the ARC chapter. This, in fact, I think it's really bizarre. It's the only standard that's there for the ARB. The only architectural standards are these. And before we threw them out, I thought you should look at, and this, I'm sure what this is about is, the subdivisions that are, they're all made out of
Like
ticky
mansions,
tacky and they all look just the same, and that's a concern there. But, the crazy thing is, I've got one down the street from me, one of those toll things, and, they make things a little bit different, but they still all look the same, The fenestration, so you do, I don't know.
But outside of the historic district, who cares? So if like my next door neighbor has a house I really like, I can't go to an architect and say, build me that?
It's gonna piss
Well,
your
right
neighbor off.
I
now.
understand that.
Right now in your code, you can't, and in fact, that did come up at the planning board meeting where somebody was making a change to the house that looked just like the house next door. And one of the planning board people said, wait, under the code, it says that they're not supposed to be similar.
I'm sorry, this is in the law right now, you're
It's
saying.
in your law now, and I didn't want to throw it out altogether. I put it in, if it's gonna be in the law, I put it in the right place where it should be rather than where it was. But I'm not gonna recommend that it stay there. But it's up to you.
Is it just me or?
It's 4 and 5.
Yeah,
It seems very strange.
That's a little odd. Yeah.
No, that was, 5 was even more crazy to me. Straight or slightly curved. So that's be enough of a curve to hide the house in order for it not to apply.
That's right now.
Talk about the police going out there with, well, it wouldn't be the police, it'd be the planning board, but still, and measuring curvature and angles and, oh my God.
So if this law were not in effect when Field Point was built, would every single house have been the same model? or would
Attached
they-
doesn't apply to attached. Lower
the
field points
sing- the
attached.
single, up
Except for
yeah,
attached.
up to Field Point. So there are 4 different models of, I don't know, but there are.
I don't think the houses look the same in the upper
Well,
field
isn't it
points.
sort of like in Legend Hill, right? I mean, to me, it's a little bit better than the Toll Brothers development, but it kind of
Close.
looks like that.
I think nowadays developers are gonna make them differently anyway, because a lot of people don't wanna live in the same house, so I don't know, they probably wanna come up.
And I mean, and let's say somebody came in with something that you say, oh God, this is great. For one, you probably, I don't know that you've got any lands left that they can do those kinds of.
But you never know what's gonna happen. in the
Subdivision.
Yeah, I was
future.
gonna say, every
I know.
time you say that,
But can't you say, I mean, isn't there enough in that they get to look at the architectural relationships of one building to another? I mean, it's just
No, I-
broader language.
Yeah, I mean, if someone came in and proposed a cookie cutter development, I think the other paragraphs cover
I think they would
adequately
cover
enough,
it.
Yeah,
They're not.
as opposed to going into such detail about this.
It just makes me uncomfortable. Like the level of management of people's tastes.
Well, the bizarre thing is it's sort of like over-inclusive and under-inclusive, it's like got too much. But then there are other things they should be looking at that aren't in their standards.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of, it's weird.
I would be happy to eliminate 4 and 5.
Okay.
Let's call that the niche excision.
I am proud to put my name on it.
Mr. Cookie Cutter.
That's right.
Well, no one will know because it's just not gonna be here.
That's right, that's true.
Okay.
The legislative history will have it.
Yeah, right.
Then the
Write books
other
about it.
things aren't changes, except one of
You
my
won't know
pet
my brother
peeves, I
built cookie
changed the
cutter, no,
witches
I'm just
to
kidding.
that, so I can't stand improper witches, I fixed the witches to that, as long as I was at it, but. Okay, so I guess the other, and if we're all in agreement on this, I think this stuff is right. I
Well,
think
you want to circle back to
the
ECB?
ECB, yeah,
Mm.
but I think as a next step, that there's probably ready to go, you know, to be reviewed by the planning
Yeah,
board.
that was gonna be my
And the
suggestion.
ARB.
Yeah, and the ARB,
Have
yeah.
them look at it.
And the ARB, they may have other thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, he's been involved in this, but yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay.
This
all right.
matches that flow chart that we looked at a couple months ago, right? So,
Yes.
so nobody who's been working on the flow chart like Ed, and I'm sure, was the planning board involved in that or no?
No.
No,
So this is the first time that, well, yeah, okay.
yeah, we wanted to, we were pretty methodical about, we developed it internally, we brought it to you, to hear where you were all at on it, and then once it's not a moving target, which I think we're getting to here,
Yeah.
then we'll have some review by the other entities.
And they'll come back with their comments.
Yeah, but we needed to know where you all were before we.
But Rick
started
already
sending
gave
it
us
out.
his comments on the, because we incorporated some of his comments into the changes.
Yeah, and in fairness, we did include Rick and members of the ARB in some of the initial discussions, when we first started to talk about the matrix, because obviously this affects them, very directly.
Right.
And so you got whatever feedback you got, and we've incorporated what we thought was right.
Without speaking for the planning board, are there things in here that the planning board's not gonna allow? Are we giving them too much extra work or too much extra responsibility that they might balk at in some way?
I don't know.
I don't.
I don't know.
but
I mean, it
I-
is, I will say, I mean, there's no architects on the planning board. I mean, I would feel, I think I would feel a lot more comfortable if there were an architect on the planning board.
But they
Or
have
somebody
the
with
advisory committee giving them the,
Yeah, but you don't have any architects on there.
Right, but with the new law, we can now have architects that are not conflicted
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
on
yeah,
an advisory committee.
Yes.
yeah.
So that's another sort of benefit.
benefit.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was
And
one of our selling points, actually.
There might be able to beef things up, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But why don't you wait to hear from them? I mean, used to be
George, yeah.
when George Boyle was on, I know he had a lot, his input was very helpful, because he's an architect, he was a good architect, and so his input was helpful. Not that they made decisions based on that, but, there was I remember one of his pet peeves, and the rest of them have gotten it, have gone onto it, is building, is like, if you've got a sloped piece of land, essentially flattening it out and then building a house instead of following
Building
the
into the
slope
slope.
with it, So things like that, but, I'm be helpful to, I can't speak for them about how the planning board's gonna feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to the chairman informally, but I don't think he's concerned about workload by any means. I think,
All right, let's
just
get the feedback.
tell us what the
Find out
rules
what
are,
they say. Could be helpful.
Did you have, yeah, and I guess you also, it would be important to have the architectural consultants, start thinking about that
Yeah.
person, who that's gonna be. But anyway, okay, on the ECB law, my recommendation would be just get rid of it altogether. I see no purpose it serves.
This wasn't in the.
No, we didn't attach this. We,
No, it's fine.
It hasn't been used.
no, not at all.
Someone could hack, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't have it with me.
It's public document.
It's just the village. Yeah, it's just the village.
Now, I don't know when's the last time anybody was appointed to it.
It's probably been at least 10 years and maybe more.
Might have been my first term, I appointed someone, and then we haven't since.
Yeah.
Did we get a letter from the ECB when we were thinking of the dog park, when we were talking about the dog park up at Pine Reservoir?
You might have. Yeah, we might have. I mean, there really were only two active members at that point, Tom Jackson and Jan Blair.
Jan Blair, right?
And, but the reality is that the planning board, the building department, when they receive applications, the law says where they have to circulate those copies to, and one of the entities it has to be circulated to is the ECB. So they actually do forward, copies or, links or whatever to the last people on record, you know?
Yeah, and it.
Just so that it's not challenged later down the road if there's
Yeah,
some
and it
issue, you know?
can't, yeah, and I'll tell you that a couple of the applicants that they actually haven't gone on with their appeals, but have appealed planning board decisions will say, yes, the procedure was wrong because it was never sent to the ECB, you know,
When in fact it was, yeah.
yeah.
The fact that they didn't do anything with it doesn't,
Right.
is not our problem.
Right,
Right,
that hasn't been
right.
an ECP report.
Exactly.
No, and.
I mean, Mary Ann, you might have a similar, different view, but our feeling was that, as I think Brian said, that in the past, in the distant past, there wasn't always proper expertise advising the planning board in the form of an engineer, you know, a solid engineer. And so there was this constant need for, you know, kind of an outside entity to watch what was going on, you know, and be check and balance, especially on some of the more difficult projects, you know, like Westwood, you know, what's Stern, whatever that is, Stearns Ridge now, whatever. You know, those types of difficult developments, there was always this need for an outside entity to be like a watchdog, you know? I mean, at this point, I think.
And besides the engineering department, we've got a landscape architect.
Right.
Who's really very, you know, really been excellent. And before her, we've had good ones, you know, for quite a long time now.
Yeah, so we kind of shored that up, you know, in the last decade, you know, and things have been functioning smoothly. So it kind of allowed them to not exist anymore, you know, and not be active.
Well, the committee met and envisioned a future, completely redesigned the role of the ARB to be an advisory committee. And that any time that anyone say, if only we had an ECB, like, it doesn't seem like that was part of the discussion. So unless there's a purpose for it, I mean, is there a purpose we're not thinking of that it could fill a hole?
I mean, it also doesn't exist.
Yeah, well, that was the first part,
Right, like-
but if it was Arlene, if it was a good idea, something we could use, we could
Yeah, but I mean,
reinvigorate it.
You know
But
what, I'm sort of looking at like these powers and duties,
I looked at them
which
too,
are
yeah.
like really, really expansive.
Yes.
Like, I think there's nothing worse than having like all these duties and
Yes.
powers and then a committee or board that you don't actually have, that doesn't do any of the stuff
Yeah.
that's on the list. So that's the lawyer in me, right? Like,
that was the
that
first
is
section I
always
looked
like
at.
not the best thing.
So one of the interesting things, and I think it was a two-pronged issue. One is that we've successfully shored up the consultants and the advisors to the planning board. But on the other side, one of the other roles that the ECD took on was an educational role for the community. That's listed here in item B under their powers and duties. And that's really been taken on by the recent, yes. So it's, you know, but even if we didn't have a paid person, we've had a volunteer organization for at least 10 years now. So it's, all of that combined really rendered the ECB.
Well, as Arlene said, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it immediately occurred to me that you guys went on this deep look at like, what should we do about this? And at no point did you say,
No.
well, if only there was an ECB, so it doesn't fit there. So unless there's another thing that we can think of or want to think of or think that would help in, then why would we keep
And I
it?
do vaguely remember that it had in the past been a hindrance as well. Like, there were like, you know, issues where they came up and they made a big deal of things, and like it didn't seem to mesh well.
Yeah.
Well, that partly, I think, had to do with the previous engineer.
Right.
Yes.
That
And
there-
some of the
there was-
difficult
there was
projects,
There was mistrust there.
Yes.
And it's probably not an accident that they stopped being as active once Hahn came
I
on
agree.
board. And Hahn is, you know, very, you know, protective of you know, the water courses and, you know, and all the kinds of things, you know, that they might have been concerned about. So maybe they see that it's, you know, taken care of. I don't
You
know.
know, if the ECB is mentioned at all in any of the earlier comprehensive plans, I'm just thinking about that time frame and what was in everybody's mind about Westwood and all. Is there anything, I guess, in our existing comprehensive plan that refers to either a formation or a role for an ECB? And if so, we might need to adjust that wording comprehensive.
Yeah,
We could look, yeah.
you don't mean the updated copy?
No, no.
The update wouldn't
Previous
have had
one.
anything in it. 'cause
Yeah, I
we-
know that we
But the updated was a limited update.
Right,
Well, yeah, but we carried forward some of the previous recommendations, that's really what we
Right,
did.
so-
right.
So, I mean, we can look, it's not
Yeah,
that, not that hard,
yeah.
yeah, sure.
Do you think that should that be the subject of a separate discussion? Do you think?
Getting rid of these.
Because, yeah, we haven't,
Kind
yeah,
of part of the discussion. I mean,
Yeah,
what,
that's why we brought it up.
I mean, I think, I don't.
what
I
did you
mean,
say, Nick?
I see it as part of the whole discussion, you know, that's why I said that there was a whole committee looking at this and it didn't seem to,
Well,
no?
no, I wouldn't,
This wasn't highlighted.
no, it's really sort of different. It really is different. The only reason I said it was related is because the thing on the process for the planning board said that they should send it to the ECB and the ARB, and I thought, oh my gosh, yeah, we should discuss this again. It's come up, but it's, you know, it's kind of been a procedural stumbling block sometimes, not,
But it
just a
hasn't,
little stumbling.
I guess I'm confused because it just hasn't existed for so many years. So to me, it just doesn't,
Right, but to eliminate it, it should be done at a public meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With no.
Oh, of course.
Well, yeah, but do you combine it with the other local law modifications, or do you
Or
have
you
it
just
stand
do
on
it
its own?
separately. I mean, it might not be such a bad idea to do it separately and see, maybe somebody will say something will
Yeah.
convince you that it should
Some of
be. in-
The 1972 Board of Trustees that really care about this.
Oh, yeah, 19.
Conceivably, somebody could be
Before I
alive.
was born.
There still is this open space inventory, and
Well, that's referred to in the copy.
it's like,
Yeah, but, I mean, we'll have to look and see to the
this
extent
says
to
that
which
they're
it's
kind of
mentioned.
responsible for that list and, you know, updating it and whatever, and so that if cases were ever on the open space inventory, they would be sent to the ECB, and then the ECB, you know, might react, but right now, the way they're handling it is if it is on the open space, it's not ignored. If a property does appear on the open space inventory, there aren't that many, but every once in a while, there was one on Jaffrey Park that came up recently, it was on the open space inventory, really didn't make much, but I guess it was kind of a big piece of property, whatever. So they had Suzanne Nolan, the landscape architect, review it with, you know, why, and she looked at why it was on the list and whether what they were planning to do would affect that at all, and she did a good, she did a good review of it. So it's not like it's being ignored, you know, something's on the open space inventory. They're having her take a special look at it and take a look at why was it on the open space inventory, and
Can we do it as two separate acts, but at the same meeting?
we could do that.
Two
Yeah.
separate laws.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, I think we should ding them for not getting the reporting by the 31st of
For
December.
for the last 10 years.
Somebody has to pay for that.
Oh, no, that's
Maybe
for a
jail time?
lot longer than the last
We
10
can amend, we can amend the law. Oh, that would be ex post
A lot of
facto.
negatives.
I think the part that bothers me is who's preparing and printing and distributing
The
books,
books,
maps,
yeah.
charts, pamphlets.
Mm.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten one.
This is
map.
before the internet.
No, you
Yeah,
meant-
yeah, clearly.
I think we just break it into two separate things. That way, if someone has strong feelings about
Yeah.
PCB, and I think, to me, the biggest point is we basically, we're accomplishing these powers and duties in different, that are still applicable.
Yeah.
You know, I assume that they contacted the Department of Environmental Conservation, but,
Yeah, I know.
I can safely say I wasn't here for that, so.
I'll tell you there 2 weeks later.
Yeah, right.
But, yeah, I mean, I think it probably makes sense to, you know, highlight it.
So we'll do it separate, but at the same
Yeah,
time.
separate, same
and even,
Yeah.
let's say at the same meeting, and there are people who are, you know, feel strongly about it, and you think you wanna give it you know, some more thought, you can still go forward with the other one, because they're totally,
It wouldn't
they're
stop
really
the-
not related at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is, to me, it's just kind of cleaning up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as long as we're there, let's clean it up.
The only thing was related is, isn't this referred to in the process, or you're taking that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
we're just
it,
taking
but
that.
it can
Oh,
come
this
on,
is also dated.
That's a quick
it can
change,
come on
yeah.
anyway, that,
Okay,
We can still have them give reports at December 31st.
yeah.
all right, I'm done.
That makes sense. Thanks for that, Mary. So, do we have anything else, let's go to the executive session.
Yeah, no,
I'll
that's
make
it.
a motion to go to executive session regarding a real estate matter and an employment matter, correct?
Yep.
All right, have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.